Imagine standing in a muddy field, holding a rusty hunting rifle. Across from you stands the most powerful, well-trained army on the face of the earth. This wasn't just a fight, it was a suicide mission.
In 1775, the British Empire was a global titan. They had the ships, the gold, and the professional soldiers. The American colonies, they had pitchforks, anger, and zero experience.
So, how did a ragtag group of farmers, shopkeepers, and blacksmiths manage to defeat a superpower? It is a story of impossible odds, incredible luck, and a spirit that simply refused to break. It started with money. After fighting a long war to protect the colonies, King George III wanted the Americans to pay their share. He imposed taxes on sugar, newspapers, and tea.
The colonists weren't just cheap, they were principled. They argued that they shouldn't pay taxes to a parliament in London where they had no voice. The slogan, "No taxation without representation," echoed through the streets.
Tension turned to violence on the streets of Boston. A snowy night, a confused scuffle, and British soldiers fired into a crowd. 5 colonists died. The spark was lit.
In 1773, the colonists struck back, not with guns, but with tea. They dumped hundreds of crates into Boston Harbor. It was a statement, "We will not comply."
The king was furious. He closed Boston Harbor and stripped Massachusetts of its self-government. He thought punishment would bring them to their knees. Instead, it united them.
April 1775. British troops marched to seize colonial weapons. A silversmith named Paul Revere rode through the night, screaming the warning that would change history. The regulars are coming.
At sunrise on Lexington Green, 70 local militiamen faced hundreds of British redcoats. Nobody knows who fired first, but that single shot heard round the world started the war. The British expected the rebels to run. Instead, as the redcoats marched back from Concord, colonists hid behind trees and stone walls, picking them off one by one. The British retreated in shock.
The colonies needed a leader. They turned to George Washington of Virginia. He was tall, commanded respect, and showed up to the meeting in uniform. But he knew the task was nearly impossible.
The first major battle was Bunker Hill. The Americans held the high ground. They were low on ammo and were told, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." They lost the hill, but they proved they could stand and fight. Washington needed heavy weapons. A bookseller named Henry Knox dragged cannons from a captured fort hundreds of miles through snow to Boston. When the British woke up and saw cannons pointing at them, they fled the city. While soldiers fought, politicians debated. On July 4, 1776, they signed the Declaration of Independence. They were no longer fighting for lower taxes, they were fighting for a new nation. But the celebration didn't last. The British returned with the largest invasion force America had ever seen, landing in New York. Washington was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The Battle of Long Island was a disaster. Washington's army was smashed. He barely escaped under the cover of fog. The revolution was almost over before it truly began.
Morale collapsed. Soldiers were deserting. Writer Thomas Paine wrote, "These are the times that try men's souls." The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot were fading away.
Washington needed a miracle. On Christmas night, 1776, in a freezing blizzard, he led his men across the ice-choked Delaware River. It was a gamble of desperation. They marched to Trenton and caught the enemy mercenaries sleeping off their Christmas celebration. The victory was swift and stunning. It saved the Revolution from total collapse. The British changed tactics. They planned to cut off New England from the rest of the colonies. A massive army marched south from Canada,
expecting an easy walk through the woods.
But the American wilderness fought back. Colonists chopped down trees to block roads and destroyed bridges. The British Army moved at a snail's pace, running low on supplies.
At Saratoga, the Americans surrounded the British Army. Shockingly, the British general surrendered. It was the first time a British field army had ever been captured in history. This victory convinced France that America could actually win. Benjamin Franklin, charming the court in Paris, secured an alliance. Now, Britain had to fight a world war. But before French help arrived, the Americans had to survive the winter of 1777 at Valley Forge. It was a horror story. Men had no shoes, leaving bloody footprints in the snow. Disease killed more men than British bullets. Starvation was rampant. Washington rode among his men, trying to hold the army together through sheer force of will.
Enter Baron von Steuben, a Prussian officer. He didn't speak English, but he knew how to fight. He drilled the ragged Americans day and night, teaching them how to march and use bayonets.
When spring came, the army that marched out of Valley Forge was different. They were disciplined, tough, and ready to fight the British on open ground. It wasn't just men. Women followed the camps, nursing the sick and even taking up arms. Legends like Molly Pitcher took their husband's place at the cannons when they fell. Not everyone stayed loyal. Benedict Arnold, one of America's best generals, felt unappreciated. He switched sides, attempting to sell the fort at West Point to the British. His name became a synonym for traitor.
Stalemate in the north led the British to the south. They captured Charleston and Savannah, hoping loyalists there would join them. It was a brutal civil war, neighbor against neighbor. But the British couldn't control the countryside. Men like Francis Marion, the swamp fox, launched hit-and-run attacks from the marshes, disappearing before the British could react.
At the Battle of Cowpens, American cleverness shone. They used a fake retreat to draw the British into a trap, destroying a key part of the British Southern Army.
American General Nathanael Greene had a strategy: fight, get beaten, rise, and fight again. He led the British on a chase across the South, exhausting their supplies and patience. At sea, the tiny American Navy punched above its weight. John Paul Jones commanded a sinking ship against a British frigate, shouted, "I have not yet begun to fight," and captured the enemy vessel. By 1781, the British Army under Cornwallis retreated to Yorktown, Virginia, waiting for supply ships. It was a fatal mistake. Washington saw the opportunity. He rushed his army south. At the same time, the French Navy arrived, defeating the British fleet and blocking the escape by sea. Cornwallis was trapped. Day and night, American and French cannons pounded Yorktown. The British ran out of food and ammunition. There was nowhere to go. In a daring night attack, Alexander Hamilton led a charge with unloaded muskets to capture key British defenses. The end was near. On October 17, 1781, a drummer boy appeared on the British ramparts, beating a parley. A white flag was raised. The fighting stopped. 2 days later, the British Army marched out to surrender. Legend says their band played a tune called "The World Turned Upside Down." Indeed, it had. The impossible had happened. A collection of colonies had defeated the mightiest empire on earth, but the war wasn't officially over yet. It took 2 more years of negotiation. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed. Britain officially recognized the United States of America as a free and independent nation. Washington did something no conqueror had done before. He didn't seize power. He said goodbye to his officers,
resigned his commission, and went home to his farm. He gave the power back to the people.
The war was won, but the revolution was just beginning. Now came the hard part, building a country that could live up to the ideals of liberty and equality they had fought for.
The American Revolution changed the world. It proved that ordinary people could govern themselves. The echoes of those muskets are still heard in every democracy around the globe today. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of human courage and conflict. What topic should we cover next? Let us know in the comments below.